Hey everyone, in this video we're going to go over how to load and unload a mini excavator. Check this out. Hey everyone, in this video we're going to go over how to load and unload a mini excavator. First thing, big shout out and thanks to Precision Landscape and Construction in Hastings, Minnesota. They allowed us to use their truck and trailer for these training videos, so appreciate that. And then the next piece is, I know you get sick of hearing it on every one of my videos, I'm not claiming to be an expert. I'm not going to claim everything I'm doing is exactly correct. I'm going to show you what I've learned and also heard and seen and things like that. But again, I really love doing these videos because you guys are going to comment below, hopefully, with your tips and tricks. So, as always, check the manual for your piece of equipment you're loading, and then also check your local regulations when we're talking about hauling heavy equipment. So, today we're loading a Komatsu PC-30 mini excavator. It's one of their smaller mini excavators. There's a whole nother video I do just about prepping, about knowing different weights for your trailer, truck, machine. So I'm going to reference that here where you can go to that other video to make sure you're prepared to haul. But again, first thing I already know, this machine's roughly 6,500 pounds. So you definitely want to know what the weight is of what you're hauling. So I know that. I know my trailer, it's a 14,000 pound trailer, so I've got plenty of capacity there. So let's go up to the front and I'll show you some other things just getting ready. Okay, and the rest is getting all your supplies, everything laid out. So I've got my chain here. I know, again, this other video goes over making sure you have the proper chain that it's hauled. We have 3/8 inch transport chain, which is probably the most common. It's rated for about 6,600 pounds. There's federal regulations that most states follow. It's 393.100 is the Federal Motor Safety Carrier Act. It's got all the regulations, things like that. So I'd always reference you to go there. If you you just Google 393.100, that'll give you a lot of information on what they recommend or their regulations. And then obviously your state and local may have different, but most of them build off of those regulations. So that's the chain, how you make sure you have everything laid out. I like to have everything laid out so I know I'm ready to go. I'm using binder ratchets today. There's a lever ratchet, which I hate. I don't think they're safe. Actually, I still have one here. Again, we go over that in the other video. To me, don't use these if you don't have to. These are not the ones I would recommend using. And then finally, so I've got my chain, the final piece is with parking, and we talk about this in the other video as well, is just making sure you're level. I'm in park, I have the parking brake on. I actually put it in 4-wheel drive. To me, that's just one more that has the front axles in park as well. Again, everyone's gonna have different rhyme or reason. If you can chalk the tires, that's always good too. But we've got everything ready. Now I'm gonna get in the machine and start bringing it up. Okay, so now that I'm in, I'm gonna go ahead and turn this on. Now I'm not gonna go over, this is not gonna be how to operate a mini excavator. We got several of those videos. So make sure you obviously know how to load and unload, how to operate a mini excavator before you go into loading and unloading. Now after that, I'm in the machine, seatbelt. I tell you what, the number of operators I see, oh, it's just a quick load or unload, I'm just gonna jump in the cab. Think about you're at one of those times that's one of the riskiest. I mean, this is where we're concerned about the machine tipping it all. I'm a strong advocate for seatbelts. There's a lot of operators who won't wear them. You are in a protective cage as long as you got a machine that's got the ROPS on it, the rollover protection system. Those don't work if you're not attached to it. You'll just end up bouncing around inside. So make sure you have your seatbelt on. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead and get ready here. Now, again, we're in a Komatsu PC-30 mini excavator. So again, I know the weight's about 6,500, so definitely well within the limits of this trailer. I like to load with my blade with everything in the front. Not mainly because I like to get as much weight over that center line as possible, and we'll show the load where to place it next when I get out of the machine. But again, I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong. Some people like to load them the other way. Really up to you, but I'm going to show you I like to do it in the front. So make sure my blade's up. Now the key here is when you start going up this thing, I like to throttle it down a little bit. I don't like to be at full throttle on these, just because it makes it a little bit, the steering a little bit more jerky. So I'm gonna come up to it, and then you also like to get your weight out in front of you. So if you think about this, I'm gonna tilt the machine back like this. I got the counterweight behind me. I wanna have that pendulum kind of out in front of me. And then the final piece there is you don't ever want to have that bucket with the teeth down. I'm assuming you like your trailer and you don't want to take a big old chip out of the deck out of that. So usually make sure that bucket, you're using the flat part of the bucket. That way it'll just kind of scrape along there. So I am going to inch forward here. And then the final, right before you go on the tracks, this is where you do a final kind of go, no go. I'm looking just to make sure. You should have lined these up before, but right before you get up to the tracks, if you don't feel right about it, get out and adjust your ramps. Most all those ramps will adjust. I'm pretty well centered on them, so I'm good right there. I'm going to go ahead and throttle it down a little bit. You may not have to go all the way down. Again, you're going to have to go up this thing, so you're going to want to have a little bit of power. So I'm going to start going up. Now, as I go up, as it's picking my front end up, I need to lower my boom. So I'm going to bring this down so that bucket is literally right off that deck. I'm trying to bring that down. Then they can also see now that my blade is cleared the ramp, I'm also going to bring that. You know, it's probably a couple 100 pounds there. Better safe than sorry. You want to have that weight pulling you down. So I'm continuing to put my boom down. I try to avoid, so right there, kind of, if you tap the deck there, you just don't want to obviously damage your trailer. So once I hit it, I'm trying to keep it a little bit above. So now I'll have to keep bringing it back a little bit. Now this is where I'm a big advocate. You'll see guys just go all on really quickly to get it over with. That's where I think you're putting a lot of strain on your transmission in your truck. So take it easy if you can. There's no race here to see how quickly you can do this. Take your time. Then eventually I'm waiting, it's going to kind of teeter-totter over. I'm going to come down right on my bucket there, right there. And then I can just let myself go the rest of the way. And then I'm over it. Once you know you're over that, then it's a matter of just pulling that bucket in. You can pull that weight closer to your center. And then you're just going forward. This is where you're kind of watching your truck. You got to get that center point, knowing where you want to park this thing. And a lot of it's going to, if you have a second, it's always nice to have a spotter or someone out. They might be able to give you some more guidance on it. But I always look at where my center, my axles, and I'm going to say right about here. So I'm not positive. You're going to always have to get out and check this on your own before, but you'll see on ours, I actually put a rubber mat on I like to protect our deck a little bit. So I tuck everything in there, and then I'm just setting this bucket, making sure it's on. There's a rubber mat right there, and just tucking it in there gently on that mat, so I'm bringing all that weight down. So I feel good right there. I'm going to go ahead and get out and just look at it before I move to see if I have to move it at all. Okay, now that I've placed the Mini on the trailer, you know, it's a lot of back and forth if you're a one-man show doing it. This is where I recommend if you can have an extra person out, you know, have a spotter. It's always better for safety, plus they can help guide you a little bit. Now I've put this machine on this trailer so I kind of have a good idea. Load placement is extremely important. You want to make sure that you're placed, you know, that center of that machine is where it needs to be to distribute the weight on that trailer. There's always a point where you have to have more tongue weight. So generally they recommend 10 to 15% of your total load. That includes trailer and what you have on there. That's how much weight should be pushing down on the tongue up front. So usually when you're driving on the equipment, you're also looking at your truck and you can see it start sinking. The other good indicator when you get out, although it's not as easy on a deck over, is you can actually see the space between the top of the tire and the fender. Again, you're not going to see it as much in a deck over like this, but you can still see distances on even to the center there on which way it is kind of going, if it's leaning one way or the other. And then I'm really looking at the back of my truck. I can see how much sag is in the back there. Those are all really good indicators. Always err on the side of more forward. You never want to have this machine, if it's back, this is where you kind of get that death wobble when you're driving, where the whole back end fishtails. So having this, the weight too far in the rear, that's probably the biggest mistake you'll see. Use that space for any other tools or anything else. Don't put anything heavy on the back of a tow. You really want to have that weight to the center to the forward, center and forward like that. You can also see with this mini excavator, generally the center of this machine. If you look at the center right here, I've got my counterweight here. I am just a hair forward, and then on top of that, I've got the whole arm and the blade out front. So I know I've got that extra weight because you have the big counterweight back here at the back of the Mini. So all those things will kind of give you some guidance there on where to place it on there. Now that I've got it all placed, secured, make sure you're close windows, doors, things like that, then we're just going to attach all of our chains. I like to first just lay them out and know exactly which points I'm going to go to kind of plan it out, and then we'll tighten them down. So when you're placing these, you'll see on this trailer it has pockets, has a whole rail here. You want to keep your chains on the inside of the rail. You don't ever want a chain coming on the outside of the rail, just in case it were to hit something where it could actually break the chain. The way I like to do these is I'll actually, if you look in this pocket here, I put it down through the pocket and then I bring it back and I'll hook it on the top like that. If the chain's protected, I'm pulling down on that instead of up there, and it's all around that entire pocket. That's the way that I was kind of taught, and I feel it's the safest way. They're hooked on there and not one of the binder, one of the chains itself. While I'm in the back, this is where that part I talked about, make sure before you secure everything, have your ramps up. If there were jacks or anything, because right now this could be holding up part of the trailer. So I always want to make sure I have my ramps up. Now, one thing I'll show you, if you look on the inside, so these mini excavators actually have hooks here. In an ideal situation, I prefer to crisscross these chains. So I have this corner pulling on this one that way and this corner on this one. The challenge on some machines I've seen, which I'll show you here, this is a standard 3/8 chain right here. It won't fit through there. So now I'm gonna have to go to the outside, which is acceptable, that's fine, but just understand there's different ways to chain these things down. You know, I have seen some people actually snake the chain through the hole like that, and there's a way you can rig it that way. If it can't fit, that's why they have multiple attachment points on these things. So for attaching your arm, first of all, I'm going to make sure I get the machine itself tight. I'm just placing the chain now. Not really, again, a rhyme or reason. I've seen some people place the bucket flat. I like to lay it all in and make it so it's tucked right in that joint there. And then I just feed a chain right through that bucket part. So that'll hold that down. I also like that it kind of, I'm gonna pull it in to keep that whole machine kind of tight as well. Okay, now that I've got all the chains into the pockets, and then I've got all my binder ratchets out, I like to get everything set, and then I go from there. I'm going to start tightening it all down. You don't want to put anything too, you want to, when we tighten it, just kind of snug it up, but we're not going to tighten everything down until we get all the different points. Again, this machine's 6,500 pounds. Technically, I can get away with, and it's under 10 feet from the blade to the back there, so I could just do 2 tie downs. I end up doing 2, I do 3. I have 1 up front and then 2 on the back on each side there, and then I'm gonna put 1 more over this. So I'll have a total of 4 on there, which to me is plenty. Again, everyone will vary a little bit. Now, basically an attachment point to me is 1 chain, kind of a full circle chain. So what I mean by that is I've seen, sometimes you can use 1 chain, and if you have 2 different ratchet tie downs, I've seen them where they put the slack in the center and they make 2 individual So if I were to take this chain right here and put this ratchet in there, in between, and then I still had all this slack going over and I made another one on the other side, that would be 2 different attachment points. It'd be 2 different connections. Because that chain, even though it's 1 chain, all the slack is just in the center there. And really, I look at it as if that thing broke, would it be a total, like would you lose the entire thing, or was it just 1 side? So that's really the determining factor for me. Again, with this, I just use, on the Mini Excavator, I go through the blade, and I run this one across, I just do 1 through there to pull that whole thing tight. So I'm already hooked on the other side, and the other reason this is why I have the hook going down in the pocket, I don't have to worry on the other side that it came loose at all. I know it's hanging on there. So I pull that tight. I also like to make sure my ratchets were all loosened. You don't want to start with your ratchets already in, the binder ratchets. Make sure you've loosened them up before you start. And then we're just going to tighten this guy up. So right when it starts to get snug, that's where I just do a final check to make sure that that binder, the chain is actually right in the hook there. Good there. And I'm just putting a little bit of pressure on it. I'm not going to pull it too tight. So that's the front one snug. The other piece on these binder chains, if you haven't used these at all, just make sure this is not appropriate. You do not put the chain through the center hole. Binder chains are designed to latch like that. So make sure you're always around there, not necessarily through the hole. So you'll see on this, it's kind of interesting, this is where a good example of just the chain itself is kind of stuck in the opening there, but this is still pretty loose. So I would loosen that up and I'm going to redo that a little bit. And I always want it pulling the opposite direction there. So that's where this binder chain you'll see is actually pulling the other direction. And I'm just going to make it snug right there. And now that I've got the third final contact on the mini excavator itself, now once they're all snug, then we're going to tighten them down. Okay, so the machine itself is all the way secured. Now I'm going to do my final one on the arm itself on the other side. This one doesn't need to be quite as tight. It's just holding the arm from bouncing up. So again, firm, but doesn't have to be overly tightened. Okay, once I see all those, and my final check to tie up the excess chain and go around, do a final check on all the connections. I like to just loop them around, then put them around the arm of the binder. Always keep your latch on the binder where it's in the tightening mode. So that's the way it won't end up coming loose at all. Okay, so after everything's connected, that's to do a final sweep of the deck, make sure there's no other things that are left on it, and then you're good to go. I will say, depending on how far you're going, it's good to stop a few, maybe 10, 15 minutes in, however many miles down the road, and do a check to make sure nothing's come loose at all on these, okay? Now we're gonna go to the next phase on unloading the machine. Okay, then for unload, obviously, same thing we talked about loading, make sure you're parked level, parking brake on. From there, I always recommend putting the ramps down first. If for some reason, I don't know, a ramp didn't work, you had damage to it, no sense in getting this thing all unhooked if you can't actually get it off your trailer. So I put the ramps down, make sure I'm on a good surface there to unload. It also is my good time to double check where I'm actually unloading to make sure it's good so I don't have to move the machine. After that, I then take off all my ratchets and then the chains. So I always recommend the ratchets as I take pieces off. Just be neat about it. Put them on the front of the trailer. Just get them out of the way. Sometimes I see people just throwing them on the bed or whatever, you're gonna run over them later. I kind of pull all the ratchets off together, put all of them up there, then I pull the chain out, and then we're ready to unload it. Okay, so after I get everything disconnected, this is the reason I like to put all my binder ratchets and the chains up front, I can see everything. I also, if you notice, when he was doing it, you can loosen them just enough to get the chain off, but why not loosen them pretty much all the way up so that way whoever has to load or use them next, they're ready to go. You don't have to unwind them anymore. So I always, while they're hooked up, I loosen them all the way up. Now that I'm in, again, seatbelt on, I can't stress that enough, especially when you're loading and unloading. And then the other thing I don't know if I did unloading or not, so I like to pop a window. I don't like having the door open just in case something were to happen where this machine were to tip, but I do like to be able to hear outside, whether it's a person or if I hear something on the trailer, something like that. So I usually keep something like that open. So now at this point, raise everything up. Now you do not want to, even though you're having all that weight back there, there's two different philosophies here. Some people will actually extend out, kind of do the reverse of what we did with loading, and they'll keep all that weight up front. Depending on where you're coming, the ground you're going onto, I like to see where I'm going. Then I can put the bucket on the ground. What I mean by where you're coming or going from, if you're really worried about tearing up pavement, grass, whatever you may be parked on, who knows, then yeah, maybe I'd go that way, because then you're going to see my bucket's going to hit the ground, and it will do a little bit, but on a gravel lot, not a big deal. So again, don't think there's necessarily right or wrong, but I'm going to go ahead and raise this up. Obviously, wherever you're in, new space, look around, make sure you're careful with the new environment you're in. Now I'm still going to, instead of reaching all the way out, I am going to try and keep my weight somewhat close to me. Now it's still going to make me more tippy this way. So now I'm going to go back. Again, I recommend a low speed setting. I pick my blade up in the back. But as I get closer here, I am going to, now near the edge, I want to get that blade, that bucket, flat. I don't want to have the teeth straight down. I want to be able to just use that almost like a kickstand. So I'll see right now I'm supported on that. So I'm going to keep trying to drive it forward just a little bit. What I like to do is I like to get over the edge like that, where now I can control the tipping point. So now, if I slowly bring that up, I'm now in more control of that tipping point. And I like to get down on the ramps. And now I'm holding those down. Now I do check my blade. I can bring some of that weight down. Now you'll see how tippy those, especially a deck over when you're that much higher, how tippy they'll get. And you'll see I have a little bit of a skid mark there where I had the bucket down. But now I'm watching that back. You don't want to scrape your blade. Once I flatten out there, then I can, if I want, I can just turn. Again, keeping that weight close and to the center. Raising that up, and now I'm good to go all the way off. Okay, everyone, that's how to load and unload a mini excavator. Again, if you have any tips or tricks, I'd love to hear them below. Let's share some of the lessons you've learned. Again, you guys, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you in the next one.